come back and go into regular committee and have a hearing. So I move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are in executive session. So now I move that we bring Senate Bill 157 before the committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. The bill is before the committee. I have a Senate committee substitute, and I move that we adopt Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 157. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. So would Senator Black, please, would you like to explain your substitute to the committee?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much. The distributed Senate committee substitute is compromise language that would place a sunset on the collaborative practice mileage extension for 2 years. There will be additional language added further along in the process that will specify in statute that an incarcerated patient who requests or requires a physician consultation shall be seen by a physician. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If not, I move for its adoption.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any discussion on the adoption of the substitute? Seeing none. So all those in favor of adopting the Senate committee substitute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted the Senate committee substitute. So now I move that we do pass Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 157. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any further discussion on the do pass motion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Esslinger,
Aye.
Senator Brown, Senator Beck, Senator Black, Senator Crawford, Senator Mosley, Senator Trent. 5-0.
By your vote of 5-0, you have voted do pass on Senate committee substitute Senate Bill 157. So now we're going to go on to Senate Bill 174. I move that we bring Senate Bill 174 before the committee. Do I have a second? Thank you. The bill is before the committee. I have a Senate committee substitute, and I move that we adopt the Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 174. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think we did again. Sorry. Anyway, so does the senator want to explain this bill?
Senator Koenig, this is your explanation.
Oh, so Senator Koenig's not here, so I'm going to provide the committee with just what our changes are in the substitute. So Senate Bill 174 is a product of Senator Koenig working with stakeholders, and I can tell you that he has done a great job, I think, with addressing some of the concerns that were raised in committee. Now, I know that, as well as anybody else does, that anytime a committee, that a piece of legislation is before a committee, goes to the floor, it has more opportunity to get better, more opportunity as it goes through the process. Basically, some of those changes that are currently included in this substitute include the definition of closed record by adding language is modified that any record closed by a public body more than 125 years shall be considered an open record. So changes in the time period for a public body to respond to a request for records from 5 to 4 business days. And there's also a change to the time period for when a records request shall be considered withdrawn from 30 to 60 days, but adds that a request for records where the fees are over $1,000 shall be considered withdrawn after 120. Is there any discussion on the adoption of the substitute? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the Senate committee substitute say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted the Senate committee substitute. I now move that we do pass Senate committee substitute 174. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the do pass motion? Thank you. Seeing none, Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Esslinger,
Aye.
Senator Brown, Senator Beck, Senator Black, Senator Crawford, Senator Mosley, Senator Trent.
By your vote of 4-2, you have voted do pass Senate Bill Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 174. So now we'll be leaving exec session, and we have one bill that's going to come before our committee today.
Second to leave exec session.
Oh, do I have a second to leave exec session?
Second.
Thank you. So now we've left exec session, and we're into our regular committee hearing. So Senator Brown, would you like to present Senate Bill 168, and you may start whenever you're ready. And you're going to leave, and, okay. Senator Brown, just begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. For the record, I am Senator Ben Brown, representing the 26th District, and I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present SB168. A little over 2 years ago, I traveled to the Capitol for the very first time. I actually sat in this room to testify at my first Senate committee hearing. Not at the time as a legislator, but as a private citizen who saw something in our government that was fundamentally broken. This was about a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was here to draw attention to a loophole in statute that allowed local health directors to claim that they had been granted unlimited power to essentially create law without legislative oversight, opportunity for public comment, or any other constitutional safeguards. The effect of this abuse was catastrophic. Without any oversight, one person was able to mandate arbitrary shutdowns of entire industries, prevent you from taking your family to church, and even dictate how many people you could have in your private residence. Countless livelihoods were destroyed in the process. Unfortunately, nothing that I do here today can reverse the damage that was caused. But what we can do is ensure that the loophole that caused this is closed for good. 168 states that no rule promulgated by the Department of Health and Senior Services shall delegate the department's rulemaking authority to any official, agency, or other department. So why is this so important? Well, as we all know, when DHSS promulgates a rule, like any other department, there is a process for legislative oversight, where the rule would go before the Joint Committee on Rules before going into effect. The loophole was that when the department delegated its own rulemaking authority to local departments, this delegated power went even above and beyond what the department itself was capable of. Unlike rules coming directly from DHSS, these local authorities were able to create rules, orders, ordinances without any legislative oversight whatsoever. In the case of St. Louis County, they were able to essentially create over 400 pages of law over a 2-year period without any accountability or oversight. Not only was the legislative body of St. Louis County unable to provide that oversight, there were times where they were outright overruled. At times, the county council would vote to end a particular mandate, and then the county executive would simply go up before a podium and say that vote didn't matter because of the power granted to him by the DHSS. While this bill would close this loophole and prevent this sort of abuse in the future, it still fully allows the department and local health authorities to address any public health issues that could arise. There are still statutes in place that allow local authorities to take action if an establishment, person, etc. needed to be quarantined or otherwise. It still allows for any local governing body to issue whatever public health policies they deem necessary through the normal legislative process. It even still allows DHS the power and authority to promulgate whatever rules and regulations they deem necessary to prevent the spread of disease, to determine the prevalence of such diseases, and to prevent the entrance of infectious, contagious, and communicable diseases into the state. I believe this bill strikes the perfect balance of allowing health agencies the power needed to address imminent threats while also creating safeguards that protect against the potential for harm when these powers are misused. Thank you, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Senator Brown? Senator Mosley.
Trying to understand what your bill is saying. So is your bill stopping the health department from being able to make mandates? Or
They
who
can
is
still
stopping?
promulgate rules. It prevents them from passing on this unlimited rulemaking ability to the local departments. So there's still local departments. There's still a number of ways in which they can go out, and if there is a breakout of rabies, where they still have the ability to quarantine, to establish. It's more. The problem was more with the rules of general applicability, where they weren't just targeting a person or a dog that had a disease, or a particular building where something was found to be being passed. They had these general rules that affected entire huge swaths of the population or entire industry without any due process or proof that anything was actually happening in those establishments.
So if it's a new disease that nobody really knows much about, you don't think that they should be able to take steps until they find out what exactly this disease does, how it spreads, and things like that?
Well, this still allows for that.
So, okay, I'll wait and ask more questions.
And I'd be happy to discuss more after the committee hearing, kind of go through it step by step. And I know it's a little difficult if you weren't. I was very involved in the process even before being in the legislature and trying to help come up here and pass laws that would restore a sense of oversight and accountability. So I've been involved. This is the issue that led to me running for the Senate in the first place. As I mentioned, it was 2 years ago I was sitting in this very room. So for me, this is the reason why I'm here. This is what created Ben Brown, the state senator. It's an important issue to me, and I'd be happy to take all the time you need to go over it and try to explain it and hopefully get you to be on board, because I think that most people would agree that what happened in the last couple of years is something that should never happen again.
Are there any other questions for this for our Senator Beck?
I do. Good morning. So, so kind of give me how would this process work? Say you had something come up like the senator was just saying, something would happen. Actually, I've been watching Last of Us, so I'm trying to keep that out of my mind as I think about this. But let's say we say something happens. And,
Like a zombie apocalypse?
Well, it's about a fungus, but anyway, it's pretty good. But so something happens that is unprecedented, kind of like what we had happen with COVID-19, right? And I think we probably have a general disagreement on how that was handled. I think they did the best they could with what they had and the information that was given to them, right? And acted in the best health of the citizens. That's my take on it. And I understand you may have a different take on that. And I get it, and I understand that. But show me, what would this process look like if you had some sort of fast-moving disease, something like that? Maybe it has a 50% kill rate. What exactly could, say, county officials do if it was centered, say, in St. Louis County or any other county? What would they be able to do? Do they have to wait and go back to the DHSS and then go to a rulemaking authority to change the rules?
No, there are still statutes in place that allow for the counties to directly quarantine, and I do have a special witness that could probably dig in a little bit more to the particular statutes that allow that and what is and isn't allowed if this were to build the pass where is. In addition, you can still promulgate rules, and though there is a process, I mean, there are steps you can take now if there needs to be some changes in the process, which I think that you could argue that there certainly needs to be, despite whether this bill were to pass or not. Those can be accounted for ahead of time, and you can still allow the local departments the ability to take steps to be able to address these things.
Yeah, and that's what I'm not really sure about if that happens, and maybe we talk offline or whatever we want to. But I still want the ability to be able to act in a way that is responsive to the citizenship. And if we're hampered by, we talk about this all the time. Government moves slow, and sometimes it moves slow for a good reason. We have to make good decisions. We're supposed to be the body that slows things down. We're supposed to be the brake. Maybe not as much this year, but we're supposed to be the brake on things. But there's sometimes when you have to act fast, and sometimes when you have to do things in the interest of your citizens, and we can talk about that offline. But I wonder if that takes away from that ability to be able to do that, and it also makes people look over their shoulder a lot and second guess what they're doing, and I think that might be an issue. But I'm just kind of trying to flesh this whole thing out. So.
Well, thank you for your question. And like I mentioned, I do have a witness with a little more of a technical legal background that could probably go into a little more detail about what specific statutes do and what the local governments and how they would still be able to address those.
Thanks.
Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, am I understanding this correctly? It's the health departments that won't necessarily be able to make those rules or whatever, but like a city council still could, or county commission or whatever. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correct?
No, so it restricts the ability to pass on rulemaking ability, but not necessarily an order. And that's where a lot of, I think, the confusion came from, because in our statutes, the rule is defined. However, order is not. Rules typically are applied to, rules are of general applicability, focused on an entire industry. For instance, shutting down, all the restaurants in the community, closing down all the churches, etc. Whereas an order is generally thought of as something more specific, like this person has rabies, they need to be quarantined, things like that. So this restricts the ability to delegate rulemaking authority, but it can still allow rules to be put in place to where local governments, local departments can still take steps as far as specific to an individual, specific to a building, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Senator Brown, I have a question. So what you're saying is that if a health department, let's say we have a city council, county government, health department, whatever, and it's a situation where we actually have some kind of similar situation with COVID. So what you're saying the change would be is that the health department itself cannot say we are going to do this, this, and this through rulemaking. What you're saying is that the order aspect is still there?
Well, it doesn't specifically prohibit orders, but that's something that I think that as a legislature we need to make sure is clearly defined as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that's just having that ambiguity out there, I think, is something that contributed to the problem as well.
Right. And so what you're saying is that the opportunity to protect the public of something similar to what we had 2 years ago would be then setting upon elected officials more so than people who are hired to work in a health department.
No, not necessarily. Say, for instance, you have a county like St. Louis County. I'll just use that example because that's what was referred to before. The county council, if there's any concern about a future pandemic and things that need to be in place, they have the ability to create those health codes and do it through the legislative process. There's no reason. I guess they could call an emergency meeting if there was a situation and get something done right then, regardless, but it does not prohibit them from going through that process now and putting policies in place that if you're infected with a particular disease, this and that happens.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for our Senator? Senator Mosley?
So you want the decision to be of the county council and not the health department to shut things down? Is that what you're saying?
I think that our government was founded on the idea of separation of powers, checks and balances, and it just to give that much power to one person, that obviously creates the potential for abuse. Human beings are not perfect. We're all flawed in some way, and to invest that much power in a single person, particularly for over a 2-year period where in St. Louis County they created over 400 pages of law. After a press conference outside my restaurant, just speaking from my personal perspective, I had the county health department showing up saying they were suspending my license, declaring us a hazard to public health. Now, you look at how that's defined in the food code in St. Louis County. A hazard to public health is a restaurant that transmits a disease through food. Obviously, we all knew at this point that COVID was not transferred through food. And we had an attorney that reached out and said, this is an unlawful suspension. What are you doing? And I was told that it didn't matter if it was unlawful because they would amend the charge mid-hearing till they found something to get me with. This is the way that this power was being wielded, and this is what I'm trying to prevent from happening to anyone else.
Are there any
you're
further
not-
questions?
So you don't want it to be the decision of the council?
No, I do.
Okay, but
I
you just
think
said that the council was the one that suspended.
No.
Who
That
suspended
was the decision of the acting director of health at the time. The county council had zero input on that, and when they had actually voted to end the mandate that was in place, the county executive came out to the podium and said, they're wrong. It doesn't matter what the legislative body says. I'm the one with the power, and you have to listen to me. I think that we
So
need...
he vetoed what the council.
I'm sorry?
You're saying that he vetoed the decision
Yes.
of like what the governor does. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Like a veto.
According to the law that was out there and the process that they voted it down, and it wasn't a veto. He just came out in a press conference. It was more of a battle of public perception at the time.
Thank you. You good? Okay. Are there any other questions for our senator? All right. So at this time, we will go to testimony in favor of. So come forward. All right.
You just leave that up here.
You may begin when ready.
Hi, my name is Kim Mathis. I'm an attorney from St. Louis. And I just want to give you a little bit of background, and then I want to try to answer your question and Senator Crawford's question. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last name, Senator.
Senator Doug Beck.
Beck? Okay, thanks. In December of 2020, the St. Louis County Council, a bipartisan county council, 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans, voted to end the restrictions that had been put in place by the medical director in St. Louis County. They were rules and regulations of the sort that are of general applicability that typically a legislature would have to pass. Kinds of things like, if we erect a stop sign, you must stop at it. It's a general applicable rule. It's not an order, it's a rule. And so those had all been issued, and the legislature decided to, there was a local law in place that only allowed that to happen if the county council approved it. So the county council passed a resolution 5-2 to end those. And Sam Page and his medical director announced that the county council has no authority to do that because the Department of Health and Senior Services has authorized the local medical director to write all laws, all rules, all regulations, everything dealing with public health. This had nothing at all to do with a state of emergency. That is under an entirely separate statute. That deals with, I think it's like Section 44, powers the governor on a state of emergency. This is communicable disease, kids who have strep throat in school. It has nothing to do with emergencies. Okay, so I just want to get that in the right realm of existence here. We're talking about like the same thing as diseased cows, what those are to the Department of Agriculture. Okay, so the Department of Agriculture, when the legislature wrote laws that allowed the Department of Agriculture, it's called an enabling act. So when a legislature authorizes an executive to act, they have to tell the executive exactly what they're allowed to do. That's standard constitutional law. It's administrative law. Executives don't write laws. It's literally like 5th grade civics. legislature writes the laws, the executives enforce the law. And so what we had going on at that time was somebody found a sentence in the regulations that DHSS had already authorized that said that local medical directors can create and enforce orders. And they said an order is basically anything we want to say. An order is any rule we want to make regarding public health, any rule at all. So what I did is I have 3 clients that came to us and said, how is it that no legislative body has ever passed a law that says countywide I'm not allowed to open my doors for business? How is it that it is illegal for my first grader to high five on her t-ball team without a legislator ever weighing in on that? And so I went to court and I took down that regulation. It currently doesn't exist anymore. If you look at the regulations, no longer can a local medical director write a generally applicable law it's gone. Sam Page has spent several $100,000 to appeal that decision, trying to intervene. He's trying to resurrect a state regulation by arguing that as St. Louis County, I have an interest in bringing that back because we really liked the state regulation. So what had been created was not local control. What had been created by this scheme where the legislature passed a law that said the Department of Health and Senior Services can do whatever they want. And then the Department of Health and Senior Services says local medical directors can write whatever rules they want, okay? And what ended up happening was we lost the constitutional aspect of government. So I love that this is in the Government Accountability Committee because that's where it belongs. And so went to court, got those regulations struck down. Sam Page is in court trying to resurrect those regulations. The county council's never voted to be there. The county council had a 5-2 veto-proof majority over all those restrictions, and it didn't have anything to do with veto. It had to do with the fact that state law trumps federal law. So state-authorized dictatorships were existing in all counties in Missouri. We talk about St. Louis County because it was the most abused there. But I brought with me emails from the Franklin County, from school districts in Franklin County that said, the reason we keep kicking your kids out of school in Franklin County, the reason they don't get to go to school is because they were within 15 minutes, they were 15 minutes within 6 feet or whatever the rules were that were issued by the medical director. So the medical director in Franklin County was writing all kinds of rules directed by the Department of Health. They're rules. Those were not simple quarantine orders, you have tuberculosis, you have to go home. It was a rule that said if you breathed air within 6 feet of another kid who had a headache, you had to stay home for 2 weeks. They didn't even have to have COVID. So we were stuck in this nonstop problem of local medical directors basically writing laws if it had anything to do with communicable disease. And they can do it for everything. They can do it for strep throat, they can do it for the flu, they can do it for everything, and it has nothing to do with a state of emergency. So that's what we were dealing with. That's been struck down. It's on appeal, and the Missouri Supreme Court just agreed to take it, and a 69-page brief was filed 2 days ago by St. Louis County trying to overturn this for the entire state. So St. Louis County would like to overturn that decision that was here in Cole County by Judge Green. They are trying to overturn it for the entire state. So it's very fundamentally important that the state not authorize a local medical director to write what is the equivalent of a rule. And a rule is defined in the law as a law of general applicability to the entire county, to an entire political subdivision. It violates the Missouri Constitution to allow that to happen. So I'm hoping I'm addressing your concerns because I brought with me statutes, and I highlighted all of them, that the legislature has passed governing the issue of communicable disease, such as rabies. I know that Senator Brown mentioned that, how do we control rabies? Well, it's all very clear that if an animal has rabies, then the state veterinarian, it's all laid out in here exactly what happens with that animal, what the state veterinarian does with that animal. They can order the animal put down. They can do all of these things, and it's very, very detailed. There's multiple statutes regarding livestock, animals, everything. What is there for people? There's 2 sentences. It says your local health department can just, I don't know what they can do to you, anything, right? So you've given them no guidance. But the one thing that this statute, this 168 does, is it makes clear that to the extent that you want to write a rule, you have to follow your local law. If your local law says in St. Louis County or in Franklin County or in Cooper County, you can issue rules and regulations, your health department can issue rules and regulations, and here's how you do it. You recommend it, the county council votes for it, fine. Then that's rulemaking that's authorized by a legislative body. But if you are writing rules and you are a local medical director getting your authority from the state, then that's a massive mistake. Because what that created was state authorized dictatorships in every local medical director in the state of Missouri. Multiple states have turned down this scheme. New York said, we can't do that, that violates the Constitution. I mean, numerous states have said that scheme doesn't work. It's bipartisan. This is about good government. This is about the fact that no one should be able to create laws not authorized by this body. And no one should be able to create a law for St. Louis Countyans not authorized by either the state of Missouri or St. Louis County. And so that's what this is really about, is government accountability and making sure. Now, there was a state statute that was passed. It was like House Bill 271 a couple years ago. And that really didn't do much, because that said you can only do it for 30 days. Okay, you can do this for 30 days. It actually didn't say you could. It just said if a local health authority, which by the way is not an agency, it's a person. Local health authority is a defined term. It is the person, not the agency. If a local health authority writes an order, whatever that is, it's undefined in the statutes, it can only last 30 days before the legislature votes. Well, they also said the order has to be about ingress or egress, and all the judges decided that just has to do with closure of businesses. So what you had with that statute was a limitation on unconstitutional activity. That was passed in June and signed into law that summer. It kind of went into effect for about 2 months. And November 22nd of 2021, the Robinson versus Department of Health and Senior Services case was decided, which made that law completely defunct. And the lawsuit that I filed is actually what stopped bureaucratic created law across the state of Missouri. Now we've returned back to generally applicable laws need to be authorized by a legislature in some way. That doesn't mean we can't respond to disease. It doesn't mean we can't. There's piles of, I'll tell you one of them. The big one is 192.300. Counties may make additional health rules, county commissions, county health center boards, all of them, they can issue rules, they can promulgate orders, ordinances, rules, regulations by any county commission, county health board. They're authorized by this legislature to do that. In fact, St. Louis County did do that. They promulgated an ordinance that said, we would like for our health department to come to us with any recommendations for any rules and regulations as long as we approve it. So that's already out there, and it's very easy. It's the way most states do it. For whatever reason, we have this loophole that allows local medical directors to just go off the reservation.
Okay.
So
All right.
I hope that's helpful. And I'm willing to answer any questions if you'd like. I've got all the statutes.
Sure. Okay, so are there any questions for this witness? Yes. Senator Mosley.
So
Actually, I have to interrupt you, Senator Mosley. How many people are here to testify in favor of? How many are here in opposition? We need to keep our remarks, what's the word I want? Short. Brief.
Was I too long? I apologize if I...
Yeah, we need to
Okay.
be able to stay on point, do not repeat other people's points, and we'll go from there. And the reason is because most of the members have other committees to go to, and so we need to make good use of our time. Senator Mosley.
So you don't feel that the public health director has the knowledge to know when he should should put in a rule that's to save people's lives?
I believe that the founding fathers of our country quoted and said, our country, we believe that legislators like yourselves can write tax laws. You don't have to be an accountant. We believe that America is not a dictatorship by people who are supposedly more educated than others. So the way our government is set up is that recommendations for generally applicable laws should come from people with knowledge. Absolutely, you're right. They do know a lot more, and we should look to them for guidance. And they have all kinds of authority to investigate, to determine things, to issue findings. But if they want a law that controls the people in a particular jurisdiction, then it has to be under our constitutional state. And by the way, the judge agreed with this already, and the appellate court did. Like we're all the way up to the Supreme Court, and we've won at every level. That this is the way our government works. And so the nice thing about this statute is it does make it clear. I mean, we don't even really have to have it, you wouldn't think, because we've won it, at every level. But I do agree with you that it is helpful to take into account experts' opinions when this body is going to make laws.
Thank you.
So you would agree that we didn't know much about COVID, so don't you think that shutting down for a small period of time to investigate COVID to see if I can be within 6 feet of a person, or
Yes,
if
absolutely.
I can
And I
breathe the
believe the
same
governor.
air? So I think sometimes we should allow those that have the knowledge in that area to make the decision until we find out what this disease really does. Because a lot of us had no idea how you got COVID, how it spread it, and which is why not just this country shut down, other countries shut down. And I don't think that we should overstep the health department that's trying to save lives until, we find out what this disease does.
Our governor did exercise his emergency powers that he's been given by this legislature to issue a shutdown, and that shutdown did occur under the emergency powers. And so I agree with you that emergency powers do initiate some sort of executive power. The issue is that the framework set up between the Department of Health and all of the little local health departments doesn't do that properly. And so we do have those situations in place. In fact, St. Louis County has their own statutes to deal with a state of emergency, and the county executive is permitted to declare a state of emergency.
I'm going to have to.
Okay, I'm trying to answer your question. Yes, I agree. It's the good government aspect of what happened here that's
all
the
right.
issue.
So let's go ahead. Do you have any other questions, Senator?
I don't really have any more questions, but I think that's what Sound Page did, was a state of emergency.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank
and
you.
who do I give this form to?
Just leave it on the desk.
Just right there?
That's good.
Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
very much for allowing us to come and speak to you.
Sure. Okay, so who's our next witness would like to speak in favor of? I apologize to the room for my voice. A little bizarre. Anybody else in favor of? Thank you. Please make your comments brief. Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning. I am here to testify in support of SB168. DHSS does not have the right to delegate unlimited power. This oversight has caused irreparable damage to families and businesses. We own 2 restaurants. We owned one in St. Louis County, and we owned one in St. Charles County during COVID. We were told that we couldn't operate our business and our restaurant in St. Louis County the same way we were operating our business and restaurant in St. Charles County. And as you can guess, one of those restaurants flourished and one of them drowned. My children could not hike outside at the county parks. My children couldn't play sports, and when they were finally allowed to play sports outside, my children couldn't high-five other teammates or even change in locker rooms. We had to wipe down bowling balls. We couldn't even get a fountain drink or the disgusting hot dogs at QT or have more than 10 people over to our home, and most importantly, we couldn't attend church. I could spend an hour walking you through the depression, suicide, and loss of business just my family faced. And with every daily breath, I was fighting for my children and business. We were told the state believed in local control, but that was the complete opposite of what was happening in St. Charles County. Our local legislative body, the county council, wasn't allowed to pass anything, and they had no say. I first wrote to my county council in August of 2020 about this unconstitutional situation, and they said their hands were tied. Page was pointing to a state statute that overrides their authority. In October 2020, I wrote to the AG pleading for help and explaining the situation with no response. In November, I wrote to the director of DHSS. And in December, I came here to the Capitol and I pleaded with elected officials to pass a law to correct the situation. When we finally got a law passed, later the judges decided that didn't stop anything except for closures, as you heard Kimmy talk about. That bill that was passed talked about 30 days. 30 days doesn't matter because local medical directors aren't authorized by state regulations to write their own made-up laws, not even for 1 minute, let alone 30 days. The 30 days only applied to closures, and all the other stuff that ruined the mental health of our children all across the state, it did not. Everything I was doing as a citizen was falling on deaf ears until Robinson versus DHSS lawsuit, which successfully ended the mess all over the state. My name is Shannon Robinson, and I am the Robinson in that case. Now Page is trying to intervene, which he has no business doing, so he can keep a state-authorized dictatorship that he loved. This new statute will make it clear that DHSS cannot hand off its authority to write rules to any one individual. This journey for me started in 2020, and here I am 2.5 years later, sitting before you, still fighting for what is right. I ask that you please pass SB 185.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that wasn't right, 168. Thank you.
Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Please leave a wet form. Next.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Councilman Mark Harder, and I'm the Vice Chair of St. Louis County Council, and I'm here today under a short notice to testify in favor of Bill SB 168 that is before you. I am not a lawyer, I'm not an activist, just a businessman, husband, father, grandfather, and elected official. But most of all, I am here as a witness to history. This bill, SB 168, if passed, will clear up some major shortcomings to our current law and restore the proper checks and balances that, checks and balances we need to rein in unchecked power in many parts of the state, specifically between health departments and local governments. I was elected to council over 8 years ago, now the longest serving member of the council. During my time on the council, I've never experienced anything close to the issues we have all experienced during the past 2 years as it relates to COVID. Specifically, all the unintended consequences of the COVID pandemic and the liberties we lost because, or by accident, or on purpose, by those who don't have the same view of our Constitution as we do. Our state and federal constitutions have a very unique feature and construct that most other constitutions around the world don't have, and that in this concept of checks and balances, or balance of power. This construct limits the power of the legislature over the executive and the court, and vice versa. It's a finely tuned legal balance. During the past few years, we have come to the realization that there are some holes in this concept, especially when it comes to the relationship of health departments over all branches of the government in one form or another. We in St. Louis County found out early that a few county unelected health department officials without input from any elected governing body could literally bring the economic engine of this state to a full stop. The negative ripple effect of these decisions are still with our economy and our community today. From health concerns, lost wages, lost jobs, low test scores in our schools, childhood depression, lost lives, business closings, financial futures destroyed, and a myriad of other social issues, too many to name here. All because of too much absolute power focused on too few people without guidance or input from the people elected like us to handle these responsibilities, the legislature of our communities. This should not have happened the way, under our system of government, our founding fathers envisioned. The smallest and the best government is the one closest to the people, county and municipal government. As a council member during COVID, I received many disturbing and distraught calls and emails from residents of St. Louis County. Here are some excerpts from those communications to my office. Councilman Harder, I am a single mother of two, and I lost my 2 jobs today waiting tables at multiple restaurants in St. Louis County because of the COVID shutdowns put in place by Sam Page. What can I do? What can you do for me? Please, please help me. Signed, holding on by Councilman Harder, my family business of over 20 years is being forced to close our doors because of St. Louis County Health Department and Sam Page. Can't you do anything to rein in this tyrant? Looking for a new location for my business in St. Charles or Jefferson County.
Excuse me, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to go quicker.
Let me jump ahead here. Some just said desperately help. These are just a sampling of the hundreds of communications I got during the reign of COVID in St. Louis County. What we've seen is the response to these citizens. As elected officials, you want to help people. That is why we do what we do, but our hands were tied. I am sure you got some of the same. This is what happens when absolute power for health matters goes unchecked. As you probably know, St. Louis County had no control over these matters over the county executive or the health department until recently. And the schools, which are not controlled by the county, did in lockstep whatever the unelected health department said, and in my opinion was intimidated to do otherwise. You can't imagine the helplessness we experienced because of this, as our residents suffered needlessly under these draconian mandates. Our economy paid the price. We, as a majority of the council, did all we could to find ways to overcome these mandates through political pressure, private legal moves, and media attention, and trying to get attention of people in this building, the Missouri Supreme Court and the Attorney General. Eventually, the AG office came alongside us and took the Page administration and school districts to court many times. Later, the mask mandate was lifted, as well as the 2-year, which should have been done in a few months, emergency orders were lifted. By that time, the people of the businesses of St. Louis County fought back and regained some of the freedoms on their own and just did what they felt was right. This bill will help greatly in closing some loopholes in the laws and make the interpretation of the law a lot cleaner.
Okay.
We can't change the past, but what we can do is learn a great deal from our mistakes so that when another pandemic or another disaster awaits us, and it will be quickly dealt with, and the leaders at all levels of the state will respect our Constitution, our freedoms, and the rule of law, which in this case became the first victims of COVID-19.
Okay, sir, I'm going to have you stop. We're not going to have enough time to hear the other witnesses, and out of respect for the others.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness?
Just one. So you mentioned that the health department forced the schools to close? Is that what you said?
No, the health department put out these directives. The superintendents in many of the districts felt that they had to do them, and usually most of our school districts and our district in the county work together, and they all decided, the superintendents, many without direction from their school boards, to do the things that they
Many
decided.
without direction of their school boards?
What's that?
Many without direction of their school boards?
Many so. And many calls we got were, why can't you do something? Our school board is doing nothing about this. They're not pushing back.
They're elected, right? The school boards
They
are
are
elected in the
elected, and
body.
they should-
Are they a political subdivision all by themselves?
They are.
They are. So they made the decision. They decide what happens in their school districts.
No, they took the information from the health department and decided to close down or do whatever they
The
needed.
school board did, right? The elected officials.
Many times, some of those did, but many were just controlled by the superintendent, and the superintendent.
Did the health department sue the school districts?
What's that?
Did the health department sue the school districts or anything?
No, they didn't, but the
No,
AG
they didn't.
did.
But the AG did.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you. I think what we're going to have to do is that we're going to set a timer so that when a witness comes forward, we're able to give everybody equal time. And I apologize for those who are going to be having a timer now, but and I understand that this is a very important topic and information. And of course, we also know that written testimony and any materials can be provided to this committee. So all the information is provided. So would you go ahead, sir? Be sure you state your name and leave a witness form.
My name's Sean Flower. I'm a mayor of Eureka, which is a town of about 12,000 in Eureka. I'm at meetings all the time, so I'll keep it brief and not repeat. I was just going to say, my role as a local government is we have a rec center, we have businesses, we have a lot of control over our community that we do every day. We have to do that. My comment to you is, without all the technicalities going through that period of time, this bill, I think, strikes a balance between recognizing an emergency. But the problem is the same rules and effects that were going into place in the first 30 days when nobody did anything, we're continuing to expand and grow 2 years, year and a half. There was no end, no limit. So from a mayor's perspective, I'm responsible for police, public facilities. I'm responsible for businesses. I'm getting calls about funerals, all sorts of things that are normally within my jurisdiction, and that's gone because the director of health manages. There's no limit to what they manage. They make all the rules without review. They make the penalties, they enforce the review, and they decide what the penalty is. And all I'm saying is what this does is tries to say whatever rule you're going to have, if it's an emergency, there's got to be time limits, there's got to be supervision, there's got to at least be input from these elected officials because there's no recourse. And in a situation like this, it allows fear to go because there's no penalty for being over restrictive because you're not really hurt by the rules. So I think one of the things after action, I mean, there obviously we all have different opinions of COVID probably and what the effects are, but I think one of the biggest problems is there's a great deal of uncertainty if you're a business, if you're a school, if you're a local official as to what the rules really are right now. And I think one of the things that you guys can do is say, hey, this, if there is something going forward, this is how it's going to work, but put the checks and balances in place because clearly you can tell it would be as if the Senate said, hey, we got 2 years. The health director's in charge. You don't need to come into work anymore. You just say, well, it's not up to me. It's an emergency. It's the health director. I'm not in charge, and I don't even have authority to anymore because there's a stat. And that's a position a lot of authorities are in. I'm just telling you, at a base level, from what you're hearing, something's wrong. If the same guy makes the rule, interprets the rule, enforces the rule, and determines whether you're there for extended periods of time, and then they're the only person that tells you when it's over, without all the details, something's wrong, guys. So that's my
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Please state your name.
Yes, I'm Jason Moore from Ellisville, St. Louis County. So I'm here to support SB168. And if I can open up my phone real quick. The reason I'm here is because Constitution matters. This was the last pure sign of joy out of my daughter, the junior year, in her last real Winter Guard performance before everything shut down and the world changed forever. After that day, my daughter spent the last 4 of her last 5 quarters from home because she was part of Rockwood School District because she could not go to school with her friends. She has not been the same. She graduated high school in 2021. So this lost her. She is now recuperating, but none of these kids are ever going to recuperate forever, for a very long time, if ever. From Mr. Senator Beck's question about if the Board of Education had any insight or involvement in opening up the schools or shutting them down, I can speak for Rockwood that we implored. I was one of those that was at county councils every week speaking at the Board of Education every 2 weeks whenever they had session, imploring the Board of Education to see reason and to force the hand of the superintendent. Nothing. So the superintendents, quite a great many of them, like Mr. Harder said, they all worked together and they all made these decisions without Board of Education actually having any say in it. And that's the way it was. These kids stayed remote for way too long, and You go look at YouTube at all the videos of the damage that's been done to all these kids and the behavioral faults that they now have. And the grades have plummeted. These kids will never be the same. And this was because of one edict that came from the Department of Health and Senior Services that spread across the land. And it takes one, I will say, corrupt, politically attuned Department of Health official to do all of this damage. This is why I'm here, and this is why I support this, because it is needed, because the Constitution does matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Good morning.
My name's Carla Gruey, and I am here in support of SB168, and I am in support of this for one very specific reason. Local unelected individuals and entities, departments, they should not be able to create laws. Laws are to be created only by legislative bodies, and those health departments should only be able to use individual orders to enforce the rules or laws that have already been created by the legislative bodies. And they should be able to make recommendations so that the legislative body has their expertise to use when they decide what rules and laws they're going to put in place. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Any others in favor of? Good morning.
Madam Chairman of this committee, Alex Eaton, registered lobbyist for Missouri Century Foundation. I have written testimony that I'll leave here, and happy to take any questions. Out of respect to time, I will not read that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Go into detail on that.
All right. Do we have any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jay.
Good morning, Senator. I'll be brief. Jay Hahn on behalf of the Missouri Restaurant Association, one of our very favorable members that brought this bill to our attention. Thank you, Senator Brown, for that. And we are here to testify in support. I will not relitigate anything in the past. We were heavily involved on 271. I think 271 was a great start. Certainly, this bill has a little bit of work probably still that needs to be done, but it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Testimony in favor of? Okay, now we'll go to testimony in opposition to. Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Sarah Schlamer. I'm here on behalf of the Missouri Center for Public Health Excellence. We would like to go on record in opposition. There's been a lot of talk about COVID, but I want to take a step back from COVID. We're focused on a very specific event. While it was wide sweeping, I want to make sure that we focus on kind of the things that we're taking away that local public health departments and the Department of Health and Senior Services has been doing for years, that has been working to protect the public health. So, orders and rules, yes, they are similar in how they are enforced, but an order is in place to act fast and to act very specifically. So say there is a tracking of a disease that is spreading from a certain location and the public health authority recognizes it, or they don't, and maybe the state recognizes it instead. The state can say, hey, look, this hot tub, this restaurant, this grocery store, there are a lot of people getting sick and they're all going to this place. Let's shut this down. Let's figure out what's happening. And then we can take a step back and really evaluate and mitigate the situation. Another thing is, say it's not a very specific instance, say it's across multiple jurisdictions. And so LPHAs, when you've seen one LPHA, you've only seen one very unique LPHA. There are some that are very robust, have their own labs, have their own testing services, but there are some that are run by one person with an operating budget of maybe $18,000 a year. There's a lot of resources that the state can provide those LPHAs that the local LPHAs cannot provide. But sometimes there are health instances that spread across multiple counties, multiple cities, outside of just one LPHA's jurisdiction. So the department can come in and say, hey, look, this area, you need more resources, you need more help to fight this specific instance. And so that is one thing that we want to make sure is not taken away. This doesn't necessarily touch the authority of LPHAs at all, but it touches the authority of the department to be able to assist us in what we are trying to do for the state and to keep the public safe. with that, I'd take any questions.
So LPHA is local public health.
Yeah, agency or authority.
Okay, just want to make sure it's clear.
Yes.
Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness. Good morning.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Michael Herbert. I'm the administrator for the Miller County Health Center, but today I'm representing the Missouri Association of Local Public Health Agencies, or MoAlpha. Yeah, Missouri's public health system is made up of 115 of us local public health agencies, and we have the state health department as well. And, we're responsible for keeping Missourians safe. Preventing disease is what we're talking about today. And we do that by implementing evidence-based control measures, every day. And we really rely on the Department of Health and Senior Services rules and regulations that's developed to help us implement those interventions. Enforcing rules and regulations established by the department, including issuing orders and delegating responsibility to the local levels, are critical to our mission. So SB168 appears to us that it eliminates DHSS's authority to make and enforce adequate orders and findings to prevent the spread of disease. And in addition, it eliminates the DHSS's ability to delegate that authority to the local public health agencies. So, you've heard examples. One example is, why orders are sometimes necessary is to isolate an individual with tuberculosis or TB.
May I have you pause just a second?
Sure.
I have to go to another committee hearing, but please don't take it personal. But we'll be back if we can, and I'm going to have turn over the gavel to Senator Trent, and we will continue with the testimony. So I just didn't want you to.
What's it? Go ahead. Continue. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. I'm pretty much finished. But individuals with tuberculosis. We know TB is a highly infectious disease, and sometimes it is necessary to order an individual to be isolated in a negative pressure room to get medications. Until they're not communicable anymore and can go out into the public. Other orders, boil orders, you're all common with those, when the water potentially gets contaminated from whatnot. So, those type of orders are issued quite frequently by health departments, municipalities, and so forth. It's MoAlpha does encourage you guys, to, keep Missourians safe and healthy and oppose Senate Bill 168. And, it sounds like there may be a little bit of confusion here. So there may be some unintended outcomes and consequences of this particular bill. So we do have, MoAlpha does have representation here at the Capitol that's willing to work with the senator to, to help, improve the bill. So we're opposed. Questions?
Thank you for that testimony. Questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here this morning. Additional witnesses testify in opposition. Senate Bill 168.
Chairman David Wynn here on behalf of St. Louis County. Want to go on record in opposition to this language, but I also want to say thank you to Senator Brown. We've had conversation. We'll continue to work on this, and hopefully we can get to a positive resolution.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Additional witnesses here testify in opposition. Seeing none, are there any witnesses here to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, do you have any concluding remarks?
Yeah, I'd just like to once again thank the committee for the opportunity to present this bill. There were some concerns that were addressed by the gentleman from MoAlpha, and I would appreciate the opportunity to sit down with them. He mentioned boil orders, quarantines, things like that, which, as was pointed out earlier, there are still statutes that allow that, so maybe just going through some existing statutes, I feel would put some of these concerns at ease, and look forward to the opportunity to having those conversations.
Thank you, Senator. That will conclude the public hearing on Senate Bill 168. With no further business coming before the committee, we are adjourned.